Now, it's easy to get complacent and just assume that because Donald Trump is an outward fascist and xenophobe and racist and hates LGBTQ plus people and is critical of Mexicans and, all the stuff, that he's not going to get elected again here in the United States for a second term. And I think that would be a little naive, to be honest, because even though he has 4 indictments, 91 charges, a whole host of criminal issues to deal with himself, I personally still think that he has a very good chance of being the candidate and winning the presidency for the Republican Party. Now, I know nobody wants to hear that, and I know that it seems incomprehensible that after trying to overturn the election and stealing classified documents and paying off a porn star and all the stuff, that he could still win might turn your stomach. But all of those things that I just reeled off, all those things that I just listed, are also, for some people, a reason to have him as president. They like that he's a criminal. They like that he has a view of the justice system and of the FBI and of migrants and minority groups that matches their views. And that is why it is so dangerous, because the rise of fascism is slow, it chips away, and before you know it, half the country has been radicalized. It's happened in multiple other countries in history. Don't think it can't happen in the United States. And if you were to believe a new poll from the Washington Post and ABC News, they unfortunately now put Donald Trump ahead of Joe Biden in national polling. Biden's job approval rating is 19 points underwater, they say. His ratings for handling the economy and immigration are at career lows. A record number of Americans say they've become worse off under his presidency. 3/4 say he's too old for another term and that Donald Trump is looking better in retrospect. You see, people have short memories, and I will never forget what those 4 years under Donald Trump were like. I remember the National Guard on the street. I remember mass protests. I remember a huge steel fence erected around the White House. I remember tear-gassing American citizens, disappearing people off the streets of Portland. I remember police brutality, and I remember a sense of unease. The country was being run by somebody who didn't know what they were doing, but would do anything to be popular. He was a populist. Meanwhile, the world looked on and realized that the U.S. was no longer one of the great superpowers while Donald Trump was in charge. And tragically, Joe Biden practically comes out of retirement when he sees the danger that Trump poses and runs for president just to halt fascism in its tracks and wins. And he's doing it again. He knows he's old. He knows that he's not a great public speaker. He knows all this stuff. He's been a public servant his whole life. But he's doing it for the sake of the country and for people to not understand what losing the republic, because that's what will happen. The republic, as it stands, will fall, and Donald Trump will rebuild it in his image. And if you are not a white Christian nationalist Trump supporter, then you will be marginalized or imprisoned because Donald Trump has made certain threats as to what will happen in his next presidency. And even though Joe Biden has probably been one of the most effectual presidents in history, he has done more for the United States. He has put it back on a strong footing. The media are not interested because Joe Biden is not box office. He will not make the money. He's not a draw like Donald Trump is. Trump is drama. His insanity enables them to sell advertising. And the mainstream media is now broken when it comes to Trump. Because, they're prepared to put the country second and their profits first. And this is what we have to understand is that, we live in a world of information warfare. And, people will shout the loudest. They don't necessarily care what it is they have to say in order to win attention and viewership. And they cover Donald Trump like he's an ordinary candidate, like it's a two-horse race. They don't mention the fact that Joe Biden's a lifelong public servant who is not a career criminal, and the other guy is an autocrat. Is somebody who advocates for shooting people at the border. Let's be very clear what Donald Trump is going to do if he gets elected in the US for a second term. And I'm going to quote some of the things that he has said recently, things that he says he will bring about as part of a second Donald Trump presidency. He said he would arrest all homeless people across the country for urban camping, round them up, and then relocate them to tent cities where they can be rehabilitated. He said he will require every federal employee to take a new patriotism exam, and they will be terminated if they refuse to take them or fail to pass. He will build 10 new Trump freedom cities around the country, which will be free of any government regulations. He will appoint federal judges in the mold of Clarence Thomas. He will have the DOJ subpoena local DAs and their staff and remove them from office if he determines that they are failing to do their job to his satisfaction. Now look, that's just 5. Anybody who is still living in reality recognizes that all of those things are insane. They are not representative of the United States of America. They are just Trump and his racism, his xenophobia, his bigotry, and his hatred. That is not what the US stands for, and yet this is what Trump is advertising that he is offering in a second Trump presidency. That is what Republicans are voting for. And let's be clear. I used to think that the Trump support was maybe, 20-30% of Republican votes. Based on this polling, I don't necessarily believe this Washington Post ABC News poll. I think that the way they do their polling is flawed. And, as we know, the polls have always been wrong in the past. But it's enough to make us think and to take seriously the threat of Trumpism for another session. Can you imagine going through that again? This time it's going to be worse. He talks of retribution, talks of going after his political enemies. Number 6, to fire staff and disband college accreditation boards since they've become dominated by Marxist maniacs and lunatics. He said that on the 2nd of May. He will seize university endowments and also fine them millions of dollars if he determines the schools are Marxist or discriminating against white people. He said that also in May. He said he will have the DOJ investigate and prosecute General Milley for treason. Well, Mark Milley, who kept us safe during Donald Trump's presidency, had to calm China down because of all the anti-China rhetoric that Trump was saying. He called for Mark Milley's execution recently. He actually said that out loud. A former president and presidential candidate calling for the execution of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I mean, this is not normal, and yet that did not appear as a headline on any of the mainstream news networks. There was no mention of it. They were too busy worrying about the fact that Joe Biden was wearing a soft-soled shoe. Trump said he will end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours by threatening to withhold U.S. aid to Ukraine if Zelensky doesn't agree to a deal with Russia. I mean, he wants to annex it. He wants to give Russia territory. That's basically what he's going to do, because we know whose side he's on. He said he's going to require that schools hold elections each year where principals will be elected by parents who will choose whoever they want to run the school each year. He said that on the 30th of June. On the 15th of November last year, he said any person convicted of selling drugs will get the death penalty. He actually says this stuff out loud. And this is what Republicans are supporting and voting for. And, I wouldn't mind if there were a whole bunch of candidates that, he was swimming around with for the primary. But, Donald Trump is out there in front. Nobody stands a chance. Not Chris Christie, not Mike Pence, nobody. He said that he would pardon convicted January 6 inmates convicted of seditious conspiracy and assaulting police officers with an apology from the US government. He said he'd have the DOJ investigate Comcast, NBC and MSNBC for treason and remove them from the public airwaves. He said that just a few days ago. Pardoned felon Michael Flynn will be appointed to a top position in his administration, probably a military position. He said he would end DEI programs in government agencies by executive order, including the military, and bring back the architect of the child separation policy at the border, Tom Homan, to run ICE. I mean, let's be clear. He's not trying to hide his authoritarianism. He's not trying to hide it. This is a manifesto for an authoritarian government in a country that you would never believe was the United States of America. He said he would terminate the Constitution if he determined that fraud occurred during the election. Just think about that. He said out loud on the 3rd of December last year that he would terminate the Constitution. He would eliminate all early and absentee voting. He would create a commission to investigate his long-standing theory that vaccines cause autism. It's ridiculous. He said he will end birthright citizenship by executive order. He will fire 40,000 career civil servants on day one and replace them with patriots loyal to him. He will set up a commission to study whether genetically engineered marijuana is the cause of mass shootings. I mean, this is the stuff of insanity. This is how this guy thinks. This is who the people that he has around him direct him to communicate. This is what they want him to say. And he's just on board because all he cares about is getting elected just so that he can circumnavigate the prosecutions that are coming his way. Let's be clear. Donald Trump wants to be the president so that he doesn't get prosecuted. He wants to pardon himself. Meanwhile, Joe Biden, who's probably too old, but fortunately still has all of his faculties in place, is doing it to save America from Donald Trump. Unless another candidate wants to show up and do a better job. You could argue the Democrats could have worked a little bit harder to, make a plan for this. I mean, we've had 7 years of Donald Trump now, maybe 8 years of Donald Trump. We knew what we were getting ourselves into. And again, everything gets left to the last minute. The DOJ taking 3 years to even bring about a prosecution for the January 6 riot and the insurrection. You see, you cannot allow this kind of criminality to go unpunished for this long, because then it just becomes normalized. And it doesn't seem like, the emotions that we all had on January 6 and January 7 and that week when Republicans got up in Congress and in the Senate and said that, it was Trump's fault and, Trump has to pay the price. Well, 3 years later, they're all back on Trump's side. On the 12th of September, Donald Trump said he would abolish the Department of Education. He said he would reinstitute a ban on transgender people serving in the military. He said he will bring back God into the public school system and impose a new 10% tariff on all goods imported into the U.S. and finally reinstitute a travel ban on people arriving from Muslim countries. This is what Republicans will be voting for. This is somebody who has a very good chance of winning. I personally don't feel that the 91 charges and 4 indictments that are facing him between now and Election Day are going to prevent him from running for office. I personally feel that nothing will stop this guy, even if it means running from a jail cell. People will support him. He'll be seen as a martyr. There is something about American culture that seems to like a criminal, seems to be attracted to the bad guy. Something I don't understand. And it's not everybody thinks like that, but enough people do to get this guy elected. I'm Anthony Davis. You can hear me every day on the 5 Minute News podcast. Download it wherever you get yours and have me tell you what's happening around the world while you make your morning coffee. You can also catch my videos, my explainer videos, and my weekend show long-form interview program here on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe, but also don't forget to join. And by clicking join, from just $2.99 a month, you can become part of the 5 Minute News community. Join me for live Q&As and communicate with me whenever you like as an exclusive member of 5 Minute News.